Knowledge Quarter is a partnership of over 100 academic, cultural, research, scientific, and media organizations located in a 1 mile radius around King's Cross. Together, our partners represent a concentration of knowledge and expertise to rival any in the world. Our partners include UCL, the British Library, Google, Wellcome, RADA, King's Place, and the Francis Crick Institute, as well as local community organizations such as the Somerstown Community Association. Amongst our proud partners is the Foundling Museum, and we're thrilled to be partnering with them for today's event. For those who don't know, the Foundling Museum explores the history of the Foundling Hospital, the UK's first children's charity and the first public art gallery. They aim to inspire adults and children to make a positive contribution to society by celebrating the power of individuals and the arts to change lives. In this event, we're going to see an incredible gift of work from Sir Quentin Blake. We're going to hear exclusive video content from the artist himself and hear newly commissioned poetry that responds to his drawings. We're delighted to be joined by the director of the Foundling Museum, Caro Howell. Previously, she was head of education and public events at the Whitechapel Gallery in London, where she oversaw the construction and reprogramming of major new education spaces and project galleries as part of the gallery's expansion. She has worked as an independent museum education consultant in the UK and abroad, developing projects that explore issues of advocacy, interpretation, and access to the arts. She was 10 years at the Tate, joining Tate Modern's setup team in 1997. She has an MA in History of Art from Birkbeck College, also part of the KQ, and a BA in Theatre Studies from Warwick University. Great biography. Caro, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bav. And thank you and Mia for all of your support. We're trying this hybrid version out for the first time, Bav, so forgive us if there are a couple of glitches, but I think take it away, Bav. So this is the Foundling Museum, for those of you who don't know it. We're just opposite the Brunswick Centre. It's fantastic to be open again. We've been through 2 lockdowns, 2 reopenings, and it's fabulous to have visitors back in the building. Bav is walking you through, there's a main staircase, which was original to the 18th century Foundling Hospital, and our temporary exhibition gallery is downstairs. And you also get a sneak preview of our new staff room, which is rather exciting for those of us who've ever had a cup of tea in our building. So, Bav, if you just stop it here, perhaps, for the minute, because I just want to give a context to the show. So, yeah, can you just pause that? That'd be great. So this exhibition has had a slightly circuitous sort of birth because of lockdowns, really. It was originally scheduled to be with us last summer, and it was going to be part of a bigger show that we were doing with another one of our Foundling Fellows, Lauren Child. And we'd wanted this whole exhibition really to look at the vital importance of children's illustrations and children's authors in enabling young people to see their experiences and their kind of internal emotional landscapes represented and explored and taken seriously. But then obviously COVID came and the exhibition had to be postponed. And then as the pandemic has sort of rolled out, and all of us have become even more acutely aware of, in a sense, the pressures on children and the way that the past 17 months has affected their well-being, and against a backdrop of of rising problems around children's mental health, the exhibition shifted. And when we made a final sort of decision about how we place it, a kind of a chunk of the ideas that Lauren wanted to explore is now happening as part of a kind of programme of digital events that will be happening a bit later, which is called What Do You Think About When You Think About Nothing? And Quentin Blake's gift to us became the centrepiece of the exhibition on site. And the origin of this show was really just before Christmas in 2019, when out of the blue, Quentin contacted me and said, I have a set of 10 works, 10 drawings, large-scale drawings, which I'd like to gift to the museum. And we had worked with Quentin before. We'd done an exhibition with him in 2012, where we had showed 4 big series of works that he had made for hospitals, both paediatric hospitals and adult hospitals. And so he has form, in a sense, in thinking about particularly children's, the units that he was working with was a children's a unit for children with eating disorders and a unit for children with kind of just more general, medical needs. And so he had very playfully explored how to sort of visually hold and support children who were going through kind of emotional, mental challenges. So when I went round to his house to go and see the works, we talked about the kind of young people who I felt would respond really strongly to this work. So Bav, if you could start the video again. So the first series that you see when you come into the exhibition is called Children and Dogs. And it's this series of 10 ink drawings that were made in 2004. They were shown once and then not shown again. And I think one of the things that strikes you first when you imagine Quentin Blake and you see these drawings is that they're not cute. And in fact, one of the only 2 negative comments we've had in the visitor comments book said, "I wish there were more children," which I think probably means I wish the children were cuter. And they're not. They are kind of quite scruffy, the works are quite emotionally ambivalent. Bav, if you just stop it there, perhaps, so we can just pause on one for a minute. But yes, they're kind of, you can't quite take the emotional temperature accurately. That a number of them, like this one here, are set in landscapes that seem to have ruined buildings and some sort of destruction. The landscapes themselves seem incredibly barren. And these dogs are supernaturally big. And so it makes you automatically begin to wonder, are they real dogs or are they metaphorical dogs? And what are the dogs there? And of course, you know, I think it was Churchill who coined the thing about the black dog to describe depression and that thing. So the dogs are kind of strange. And sorry, to start again, Bav, if that's all right, and we can kind of carry on, but I just wanted to hold there till you see the landscape, and you'll see that picked up in a number of them. But what's also interesting in these drawings, and perhaps, yes, we'll go on, maybe the next one, and we'll stop again, perhaps, Bav, yeah, here maybe, is that a number of the drawings, the children have art materials. They have drawing materials, they have cameras, they have pens and paper. Sometimes they seem to be in the middle of drawing. The boy that we just passed is holding up his drawing, and you're not quite sure, is he holding the drawing to show it to the dog, or is he holding it almost like a shield to protect himself from the dog? And here we see this young woman who's got a very, very long reed pen, and there's a sort of what seems to be a bowl at her feet, and the dog has got a reed pen in its mouth as well. But do kind of keep going for me, thank you. And you can also see the quality of the lines in these drawings. You can see very clearly the mark making, and in places the ink is very thick and actually sparkles, which is okay, there you can see a camera there, and then there's a book on the ground. So there seems to be an implication in these drawings that the act of creativity, the act of writing or drawing is something that enables the children perhaps to process where they are, or to give language to where their feelings, or kind of navigate the space that they're in. And the dogs themselves are quite interesting because they're kind of wild and unkempt, rather like the children themselves. But they and the children are completely unsupervised. There's no sense of kind of adults in the thing. And at times they're partners in crime. And I think, Bav, this might be the last one in things if we hold here. Yes, so at times the animals and the children seem to be kind of, the dogs are kind of partners in crime in something. Sometimes there seems to be a kind of sullen cohabitation between the dogs and the children. And in others, there's a kind of quiet companionship. But again, it's they are an interesting set because you cannot, it's not clear cut. There's a huge space there to explore. And I had said to Quentin, when we were going through this, that we do a lot of the work that we do are with children and young adults who are either in care or have left care. And that sense, and we also do quite a lot of work in paediatric inpatient wards, and this was pre-COVID, and that sense of actually having art that effectively gives permission to children to not have to put on a brave face, to not be perfect, to not be tidy, to not be smiling for the camera, to not actually have to be this perfect picture of childhood, but actually that they see themselves, the kind of ragged aspects of themselves, and often those aspects that they don't yet quite have language to explain how they're feeling and how they're thinking. So what I thought was interesting, just thinking about, and I've flagged up some of the drawing material that the children had in the pictures. Amongst them are reed pens and pen pens. And in 2012, when we showed this exhibition of the work that he'd done in hospitals, which was called As Large as Life, I made a film with him where I specifically asked him about the material, the methods that he used as an artist and why he made the choices that he made. And so looking at the appearance of these pens in this series, to me, it resonated with an autobiographical sense, because I remembered how he talked about it. So hopefully, if we've got my time, I've got my timings right, we will segue into a bit of film where Quentin talks about just that. So if we finish up these works. And you might want to turn your volume up because it's quite quiet there.
When I started drawing, I could only draw with a very sharp little pen nib on typing paper, which is probably what was available to me. And I spent a lot of time drawing with a Waverley nib, which is an old writing nib, which you just dip into a bottle of ink. And that gives you a sort of scratchy quality. And so that when you're drawing the gesture or the forms, you can actually feel it happening. And as I've gone on, I found more things to draw with. You can draw with anything, actually, but it's a question of finding what's an appropriate thing. And when I came to draw naked mothers and babies, I used reed pens, which are just reeds cut as pens, because they kind of give the quality of flesh rather than the quality of material of clothes. The other thing that's quite nice about them is that they're tricky. So you can't absolutely guarantee what's going to happen. You just have to go for it. I think hard about anatomy while you're, not anatomy, but the way bodies move about and arrange themselves. So that they have that they have a kind of smoothness about it. And then the eating disorder ones, they're actually drawn with quills. And the nice thing about quills is they're also a bit unreliable. They're slightly scruffy in the way that they're not tidy lines, and they're a little bit uncontrollable. All these pictures are done as giclée prints. That is their digital prints, which are fantastically faithful. They're like facsimiles of the original, and if you have one at the same size as the original, it's almost indistinguishable. It's like a forgery, really.
Is that about to cut there, Bev? That's great, thank you. And I think it's rather lovely. So I will, hopefully if you come to see the show, having heard the difference between his pen, his reed and his quill, but you can look at the lines, but you can see the kind of the language of the mark making that he does and how fascinating he is. So if we start again with the next thing. So, just actually stop, I lied, I've just hold for a second. So I obviously went round to see these works with Quentin, and I was talking to him about the work that we did with young people. And as I said how powerful I thought they would find them. And beginning of 2020, out of the blue, I got another email from him saying, I'd been thinking a lot about what we were talking about, and I've made another 14 drawings for you, which was extraordinary. And these have a very, very different quality. And so this second series is called Children with Birds and Dogs. And this is what we're going to see next, and it kind of follows on in the sequencing. And I think the first thing that you notice with these is there is a very, very different mood. And the mood is set because these large-scale drawings are oil pastel. And I think oil pastel, it's a much more even line than working with the pens. So it immediately gives a kind of calmer mood to the drawings. They're softer tones and colours. There are smudges where, Quentin clearly has, the ball of his hand has kind of grazed it and smudged it. So there's a kind of that softness. And you get very strongly the weave of the paper as well comes through with the oil pastel. The other thing that's quite interesting is that an awful lot of these drawings, there's a very direct gaze between the children and you, the viewer, which I think is interesting that Quentin has chosen to do that after our conversation about the kind of audiences we wanted to do. And also the children are in these wide open landscapes. So Bav, if you want to hold on one wherever you like, that there aren't buildings in them. There isn't that sense of kind of human habitation. The children are much more sort of at one with nature in these wide open landscapes. And I think the sense of not having buildings, it's less about an isolation. I think there seems to be more a quality of something that there's a kind of purity in there, or a sort of a harmony with the environment. And again, of course, much like the first set, there are no adults in this thing. And I think the other thing that's interesting that I like very much with these drawings is that Quentin chooses that point in very young adolescence, that sort of around about 12, 13-ish, it seems to be. So that point where children are hovering, that there are times when they behave like very little children, and then times when they're behaving sort of like teenagers, but they're very much at this kind of threshold between childhood and kind of emergent young adulthood. So I think that kind of point of balance is lovely as well. And again, Bav, if you want to start them up again, the series of 14, they're all individual boys and girls apart from one, and there is one drawing which is a pairing of a boy and a girl. And I think also just hold that one if you can, Bav, sorry, stop. But I think it's rather wonderful that the dogs and birds, there's something that a lot of these birds are storks. And I think it's rather lovely because, and I think this one does it particularly well, that sense of storks as being quite gangly. They're quite beautiful, but they're also a bit ungainly, and they have moments in flight where they're glorious, and then there are other moments when they kind of do. And again, I think it's sort of, it feels like a companion, a kind of a sort of a kindred spirit in that kind of slightly awkward gawkiness, or indeed you have the great scruffy dogs, which are equally lovely in that sense. Again, I think with children of off-on, they're either completely overexcited and everything's fantastic, or they're completely exhausted and they're kind of stomped out. So do start again, Bev. So I think, and then we also have smaller birds, which are more sort of little observers of what's going on. But the bigger creatures, the big dogs and storks, I think have that lovely sense of camaraderie with the children. And of course, the other thing is that these drawings, I think, are much more perhaps benign, because the animals are to scale. They're not, they are the size that they are supposed to be in relationship to the children. So it feels more, more intimate and more domesticated, I guess. So we just walk through these. So we had these two wonderful series, and I love this very big fat crow in a sense with his great shaggy bottom. So we had these two series of works, and I think what's really interesting when you think, Quentin is now in his late 80s, and he's illustrated over 300 books, and this extraordinary career of illustrating the work of others, also, as a writer and illustrator himself, and that children are so key to his practice. But in terms of our historic story, you know, like Thomas Coram and William Hogarth and George Frederick Handel, Quentin has no children of his own. So it's there's an amazing, powerful empathy in his work, and the way that he, and if we just hold here for a minute about the way that he, like Lauren, that as gifted children's authors and illustrators are able to immerse themselves in the world of children. And he says specifically about this set, he says, the drawings in my donation look at the relationship of the children I draw with living things around them, sometimes positive, but often tentative, comparable to the ones that they may have to the world around them. And again, it made me think about when we made this film with him, he spoke about this process. And again, I wanted to give this little clip to give you a sense of how he talks about the way that how he looks at the world through the eyes of other people, both the work of other writers, but also his own characters.
I mean, I can call it illustration because at one time, if you were illustrating a chapel in the 15th century, you didn't call it illustration. It was what artists did. You know, you told the story of whoever it was, and perhaps you put in a picture of the person who was paying to have it done, and that sort of thing. So, in a sense, you know, I can't help thinking about that a little bit when you do a complete set of pictures for a hospital situation. It's kind of a cheerful secular version of something like that. I try and resist people talking about, which they sometimes want to, about therapeutic effects. They may have, you know, but we don't know that, and it's quite hard to quantify it. In a sense, it's like acting. You imagine yourself into that situation. It's not much about the surroundings. It's not much about the scenery, the situation. It's about the people in that situation, and you just try and imagine that you are. It's not that I particularly identify with children in children's books. You just imagine you are that person, and you imagine the dog, or you imagine that you're granny or whatever it is, and make those sort of gestures. And it was, I mean, I was very touched because somebody on the staff in Angers said to me at one point, "How did you know that? You're not a woman, you're not a mother, you're not even a parent, you know," kind of thing. And you don't know. It's something that is what's interesting about drawing, I think, is that you act the drawing and you probably find things that you don't know you know, the way that people react, the way they react to each other and that sort of thing.
So, and I love the way that he just says, you just. You just go, no, the very, very gifted people do, but not everybody. So those, and that was a slightly longer clip because also I was also very struck at the time when the way that he talked about the way that people see illustrations, somehow that sense of, you know, that as an illustrator you're lesser than sort of an artist, but of course that great tradition of Michelangelo and Giotto as illustrators. So when we knew that we had these 24 works and that we were going to show them all together, I thought, and because Quentin is now, you know, in his 80s, and this sense of conversation across generations, that we decided actually that we wanted to reverse the direction of travel, and that for a man who had spent a lifetime responding to the writing of others with his art, that we would like to get writers to respond to Quentin, and it's really tickled him, the whole process. So we invited 7 poets, and we also have the fantastic musician Kerry Andrew as well. So within this project we have our 2 Foundling Fellows, Quentin and Lauren. We have 3 children's laureates, Quentin, Lauren and Michael Rosen. We've got Jackie Kay, who until recently was the Scottish Macca. And in total we have our poets are the 4 brown girls who write, who are an amazing poetry collective made up of Roshni Gayati, Sharon Hujan, Sheena Patel and Suma Khan. Sarah Agdebute, who is incredibly young, emerging poet. She was the overall winner of the 2016 Young Poet Network. And Jackie Kay, obviously Michael Rosen, who's been a long-time collaborator of Quentin's, and so in a sense it was perfect that he was there. Yomi Sode, another incredibly gifted writer and poet who's recently had his play Breathe on at the Almeida, and Ben Westwood, who was a former child runaway and had experience of life living on the streets and has contributed a beautiful poem too. And then, as I said, to cap it all, Kerry Andrew, the composer, has set Michael Rosen's poem to music. So it's this wonderful cross-generation conversation between artists and writers and musicians. And so what we have for you now is some of the poets reading their works in relation to their specific chosen poems. So not all of them, which is another good reason for you coming and seeing the show. So Bav, do take it away.
Big Dog 2. That day, a summer's day, a while away, in the past, I suppose, we had no picnic, nothing to eat, and were dressed in the wrong clothes. We sat under the dog all day, a big dog, big as memory, and we thought about what'd gone wrong and why we were running away.
This poem is called Monologue, inspired by one of Quentin Blake's illustrations from his Children and Dogs collection. If you could understand me, I'd tell you about the way that tide at the edge of the ocean seems like a storm taking a breath. To me, at least. It calms its anxious waves of panic the only way it knows best. I tell you how to howl into the night and not be afraid by what answers back. That my favourite part of the rainbow is that part which we cannot see. I tell you how to count heartache on the tips of your paws and start again at naught when you've found one who is anaesthetic to the pain. If you could understand, I'd tell you the wonders of our species and when we came to know yours. How we conquered a world and ruined it all within a space as small as the corner of your eye. I cannot imagine all the coincidences it took to have me here, at this moment, and you beside me, in the next, trying to fathom those chance encounters, glances back it took to build our bodies across torn gaps of earth. If you could understand me, I tell you how it feels to fall in love for the first time. That when it comes to humans, my friend, mating is not just about sniffing bums and barking in the street. Well, okay, maybe it is. But I wouldn't expect you to understand. I don't want you to. I like your honest yawns and pleading eyes, the way you roll into my arms just to say thank you. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but your body is an open book. To me, at least. Everyone else answers back or gives advice, tries to empathize, but when I ask you questions of heartbreak, promises unkept, what it feels like to crave the wind as a kiss around your neck, you bark in my face. Coat clean clothes and smelly saliva. Your not so subtle way of telling me to shut up. Listen. Hear the world around you. Slowly exhale.
My mum is a robin. I'm pretty sure my mum is a robin one minute and a wren the next. On a Sunday a wren, a sparrow tomorrow. Maybe a jackdaw on Monday, always flying close, close to me, as if to say, here I am, my daughter, can't you see me? Can't you hear my song? See me fly near you, listen to the music of my wings. Sometimes cross, my mum finds a branch close and perches her soft little feet and stares right into my heart, bead eyes, till I look up, feet deep in the muddy water, marshes behind me, and say out loud, in case she can hear me, is that you, Mum? I miss thee, I miss thee.
Ready or not, for Harry. Before the therapist sought my mind to question its inner workings, a mind that reminds me of elders never wanting to be rushed, something comical in witnessing how frustration bubbled hot, then brewed an impatience in people. Knowing my mind's decision to take time was never arduous for the sake of it. It simply required trust. If I could venture to Yomi, aged 12, I would focus the lens on the period my mum purchased a budgie to fill the silence on days she works night shifts. We named him Harry for reasons we don't remember. Something living and breathing, not an absent father or a sibling, something outside of her to speak to. Harry would lose his shit whenever the Fugees' Ready or Not started playing. His cage rocked in pandemonium of what I would describe as two-stepping. Harry took many steps, side to side on his perch at the sound of the submarine sonar, followed by Lauryn Hill's chorus, like pastors chanting affirmations to their congregation. I spoke to him on the nights he slept, stumbling through questions I was too young to ask adults. Occasionally, an eyelid would lift, then shut, all the stillness of his frame, and his chest, pulling in, then pushing out, holding my secrets, keeping them safe. The morning I woke up to the news of his death, I felt like I did not keep him safe. I also felt like I lost someone to talk to. The utterance of chirps, the laughter and chaos in catching, then ushering him back into his cage had gone. I was back to the silence on the odd occasion. Back to my mother, trying to fill the void of another body again.
Again and again, we went out. We packed our bags and tramped and tramped. We sang and talked, talked and sang under big, big skies. We found hills and rivers, moors and valleys. We talked and sang, sang and talked and tramped in the rain, in the sun, under big, big skies. No one told us to. We chose to do it again and again, always looking for rivers and hills, valleys and moors, under big, big skies. The road and the path and the disused railway track stretched out ahead again and again, leading on and on, with never an end, under big, big skies.
So that gives you a little, a few of the poems and a sense of the exhibition. I think one of the things I think is really, we have a visitor comments book outside the show, and it's just full of wonderful, all ages of handwriting, but really wonderful, thoughtful comments. And I think if I had to, Bab said, why should people come? And I said, I think the thing that's funny about it is after 17 months of incredible upheaval and anxiety and distress, and disquiet in a weird way, this show is a wonderful moment. It's very focused, it's very still, but it's incredibly expansive, and it feels like a real balm. And the idea of just to slow time down a bit and to think quietly and quite deeply about issues that really unite us all. And I think one of our other fellows, the artist Richard Wentworth, put it very beautifully once when he said the Foundling Museum isn't a museum about children, it's a museum about childhood, which is something we all share. And I think Quentin has provided this extraordinary springboard for artists in their very early 20s to, you know, artists in their 80s to reflect back on childhood and that kind of complication of emotions that we all felt. So I do come and see it. It's on until the 26th of September, and it's a lovely thing. Bring your family, and I know that you've been sent a promo code, so you can get a discount to come in. So do, because it'd be lovely to see you, and it's a beautiful show that I hope you can catch. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And I think if anybody has any questions, I think now is the time to be asking them. Is that right, Beth?
Absolutely, there's time for questions. We're about 10 minutes, so don't be shy. Any questions from the audience, please put them in the chat. We'll weave them in. I can say I was there filming this yesterday, and it's absolutely brilliant. So do go and see it. Take advantage of the special offer. And there's a lot more poetry on display there than what we used in the presentation today. I've got a couple of questions. I noticed a book on a shelf behind you, the COVID letters, which managed to do a whole thing without using the word COVID once. But what do you think is, do you think this exhibition also speaks about what children are going through right now as a result of the pandemic, and also what the next year, perhaps more, will look like for young children?
I think not so much necessarily, it's speaking directly to COVID and the pandemic, but I do think it reminds us, like I said, particularly the first series of drawings, but I think the writer's responses, it reminds us all as adults to give children the space to find ways to articulate themselves. And as I said, I think it's very clear that for Quentin, and I mean, we feel the same way, and Lauren feels the same way, that actually creativity, writing, drawing, singing, and being out in nature, these are really important tools for us all, but for children particularly, to create language for things that they can't completely articulate. And I do think as we look to how do we help children recover from this sort of lost year of education, and I think there's, in certain quarters there's a real rush to lengthen the school day and put in extra classes, and I think, I am very much in the school of thought that says children need more space. They need space to process, to play, to be outdoors, to make an experiment, and creativity in its widest sense. And I do think the drawings speak to that. And I said, in the way that adults and children are responding to it, I think it's also that sense that we need to be kind with ourselves and give ourselves space to process what we've been through and are going through still.
Yeah, absolutely. Has Quentin Blake had a chance to hear the poems or read the poems, and what was his reaction?
He was. I mean, I think tickled is the best word. When I said to him, this is what our plan is, I could hear his voice coming through his emails. And as the poems kept pinging through, I would push them on to Quentin. And I have to say, when Jackie's poem came through, she wrote 3 poems. And My Mother is a Robin, as those of you who are fans of her work know, Jackie was adopted, and her beloved adopted mother died just after Christmas. And so I read the poem and just burst into tears at my desk and was like, oh my God, I was sending them through to Quentin. And yeah, he's just been thrilled. And I think, isn't it? I think he is, he's the definition of a living treasure, and that sense of, he has spanned so many generations. I mean, Yomi talks about the fact that Yomi has children now, that, for so many of us, it's like we had them as children, we're now reading them to our children, or, grandparents, and that sense of him as this connective kind of tissue that pulls us all from all different disciplines, different walks of life, different cultural backgrounds, different ages. We share this connection. So yes, he's been delighted, and we thought it was a good idea, and we were pretty sure that people would come up with brilliant things, but it's been a real slam dunk in terms of every poem is a complete barnstormer, and as I said, some of them are very moving, and all of them make you think in a different way and see the works in a different way, but yeah, reassess your thoughts as well. So we're feeling very smug because we think it's brilliant.
Absolutely, I don't blame you at all. There's a question from the audience. Are you going to be making a book of the pictures and the poems?
We are hoping to, we are in the process of making what's going to be a free booklet that we can give away, which will have the paired images and poems. I mean, I think it's fair to say, like all cultural organisations, but particularly small independent ones like us, we were very, after the COVID Letters, which was this wonderful show that we opened last autumn and was open for 3 days before we then went back into lockdown again, we were quite nervous about committing to a publication when at that point we weren't quite sure, but we are now doing it. So we have a list at front desk of those people who've been to see the show and have said, please send me one when you've got them. And if you come, yes, you know, they'll be arriving fairly soon and will be with us until the end of September. So yes, definitely. And you can visit Smartify and you can hear the poems being read and see the exhibition on Smartify as well.
Fantastic. Is this the first time that you've worked with poets in this way as a reaction to the art, or you've done this before?
We have worked with poets because obviously writers and text is a key part of our story. I mean, not only have we got this extraordinary, you know, the admission booklets and, you know, a lot of the mothers who left their babies in the 18th century, when they left, some would leave poems as well as notes and things. So text has always played a big part. Charles Dickens was a very important supporter in the 19th century. And we have worked with writers in the past. Our fellowship, which is biennial, and every other year we award the fellowship to 3 creative people, one of whom is usually always a writer. So amongst our fellows, our very first fellow was the author Jacqueline Wilson. But, you know, we have Michael Morpurgo and Jackie is now one of our fellows as well. And I think also we did, back in 2013, we commissioned a number of artists that included poets. And that was the first time we worked with Jackie to create a response to the tokens, the little objects that mothers left with their babies. And a lot of these objects have lost the connection with the original baby they came in with, so they're effectively orphaned. And we asked Jackie and David Shrigley and Charlie Dark and Ali Rubenhold to make responses to those. So that's a long version of saying no. Writers are in there and they're kind of woven through. And I think ours is very much a story about all the creative disciplines, all of the arts, and the way that they can galvanize society and help transform lives through different forms of creative action, really. So
yeah, fantastic. Now this exhibition is running till Sunday 26th of September. What's next, the Foundling Museum? Tell us a bit about your future projects.
Well, the autumn is going to be an extravaganza. Our major exhibition down in the Temporary Exhibition Gallery is called Fighting Talk, One Boy's Journey from Abandonment to Trafalgar. We have, in the Foundling Hospital from its establishment in the 18th century, all the children were taught to read and write to a very high standard. So we have in our collection, it's never been shown or published before, but this beautiful handwritten memoir by an 18th century foundling called George King, whose life reads like a boy's own story and involved him being press ganged into the Navy and fighting at Trafalgar. So the exhibition will be looking at his life. We have also commissioned 5 outstanding artists to make portraits of 5 of the former pupils of the Foundling Hospital. The Foundling Hospital closed as an institution for children in 1954, and so this is the last generation of children who grew up there. So the artists include Wolfgang Tillmans, Mahtab Hussain, Eileen Perrier, Gillian Edelstein and David Moore. So those will be up the staircase, and it'll be the first time the collection actually has portraits of the children rather than just the benefactors and governors. And finally, the artist Ingrid Pollard is making a beautiful display, including a new commission in response to George King and the Foundling Hospital. And her practice is very interested in ideas of empire and identity and the land and landscape, and so that's going to be very beautiful. So it'll be top to toe fantastic, a kind of again a connection over 250 years with the idea of care and leaving care, from George King to our former pupils and indeed our young care leavers today, who will be delivering family workshops and engaging our visitors.
Fantastic. Look, I know it's an incredibly stressful period of time for all museums and galleries, but especially small ones like yourself. But nonetheless, you've taken out so much time to share with us this wonderful story. It's a great exhibition. So those of you who are really interested, I would take advantage of the offer, go and see it before it finishes. Before you leave today, do leave your comments and give us your feedback. We really appreciate it. It's the first time we tried not just having still images in the PowerPoint slideshow, but actually going around the gallery with the camera. We hope you liked it, but let us know if not, and we'll try something different next time. We've got a couple of events coming up for those who are interested. I'm just going to put up a screen there and just show you. Next slide. Here we go. We've got 2 more virtual private views in September. One at Senate House Library celebrating their 150th anniversary. So they've got 150 objects that they've chosen from their archives. And that private view is on Tuesday, the 7th of September. It's also a virtual one. And then there's 2 exhibitions happening at the Wellcome Collection, one on joy and one on tranquility. And we've brought them together. So you'll get to see that on Thursday, the 30th of September from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And then we're also working on our first in-person private view, which will be an after-work drinks and snacky type thing. So look out for information on that. That'll be at the Francis Crick Institute. Look, a massive thank you to all of those, all of you who've attended. The sun's out, so I'm sure you would have rather sat in the garden or gone out for a walk or something, but nonetheless, you've joined our event. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know your feedback, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. And once again, a big thank you to everyone at the Foundling